Sergeant Druin will provide the update.
Thank you, Your Worship. This will serve as our update for the period of April to July, following our strategic plan that we discussed at the last meeting. Just to give a bit of an update on our efforts towards improving road safety, we've initiated 124 contact with motorists over this period, which was resulted in 47 warnings, 77 violation tickets, and 13 impaired drivers who have lost their privileges from either a criminal code impaired charge or a charge under the immediate roadside prohibition program. In addition to our local efforts here at the detachment, we've enlisted the assistance of the Community Policing Office with the deployment of the speed board. And maybe Marlene, you want to fill in the gap on that, please?
Okay, so over that time, our speed signs were deployed to 32 locations. They stay there for a 1 week period and provide immediate driver feedback, but also timely reports that we then forward to the ICBC safety unit in Kamloops, as well as our CPO constable, who can then forward that information to the detachment. Over that period, there was 262,653 vehicles were monitored, and I have myself and 3 volunteers that are involved in that program, whether it's the person actually deploying the sign, the person that's doing the updates within the computer, or we even have a youth volunteer that actually does the counting of the.
Thank you. The second item on our program was business safety. And over the period, we've initiated 39 contacts with local downtown businesses. And of course, these contacts range from officers just proactively addressing concerns related to break-and-enters, mischiefs, or their nuisance calls. Since January 2021, Merit has enjoyed a 25% decrease in the total of commercial break-and-enters and an 8% decrease in mischief to property. But that's commercial and private combined together. And our community policing office again has a large footprint on this, and are continuously working with businesses to do crime prevention by environmental designs assessments. We call them Septic in the policing world here, and I believe Marlene has 3 in the hoppers here that are waiting for an assessment, correct? Anything more, Marlene?
How do you pick them?
Through conversations with them when they may come to the office and speak to me, and then I would offer that service. Or through constable at the detachment, identifying them because of a file, or just as I'm walking around downtown and see something in a conversation and request it.
Okay, thanks.
Our next item was our efforts to improve the downtown safety. So we hope to accomplish that through having some visibility in the downtown through foot patrols or bike patrols. So during the period, we participated in 83 proactive foot patrols in the downtown core. Again, mostly just there to provide boots on the ground, police visibility, and address nuisance calls, often related to public intoxication, loitering, or drug use in the downtown core. Again, our efforts are boosted by our friends at the CPO, who is operating a number of programs to help us in that endeavor. And again, Marlene, if you want to.
And can I get back to Marlene, back to the septic, and possibly with Sean as well. Can we start doing some kind of media, I don't know, campaign on this is what we're promoting? I'm not sure.
Yeah, we need to be mindful, of course, of Marlene has a fixed capacity. That being said, there might be some opportunities for us to identify what that capacity is and over the next period of time, and then advertise if there are people who are looking for assessments and just kind of schedule them in over a period. That's something that we can absolutely have a conversation about and report back to you on.
And if there's too many, then we'd have to do something about that, wouldn't we? I mean, rather than just saying no. I mean, that's a potential for an increase in service, but that's not a bad thing. Constable Filler.
A lot of these assessments are done as well. As Marlene said, a lot of them come in as referrals off members. A lot of those referrals come in from myself as well. And these are maybe businesses that are identified through my foot patrol activity. And these would be ones where, maybe there's either through a day or a night patrol, I see that there's a shortcoming in maybe the physical security or visibility of the building. Things like just simple things, even like lighting, access around the building, how the building is secured by ways of like doors, locking mechanisms, and other things like that. And these are things that we address through our review of the physical structure security, and we can address with business owners themselves. We've had a lot of success at advising business owners to subscribe to or to increase their security presence with the installation of like CCTV camera systems and stuff like that. And then obviously assist us in our day-to-day role as police as well. Beyond just the physical security of those structures, they assist us in conducting other investigations that happen in town with regards to motor vehicle incidents, major crime incidents that happen. We have to canvass for video.
Thank you. Did you want to add anything about it?
Well, I think that it's something that I like to do, and so I would be happy to increase that sort of thing. But as John said, that being mindful, if there's some other things that could come off my plate, then I would be more than willing to continue these.
I can promise that we hear you, and we will have some conversations with that, because as you say, this is something that I think does provide value for businesses. We're really fortunate to have a resource who can do those. You've been some of the benefactors of seeing some of these reports. You of course saw one for Spirit Square, and I think that as we implement these as a community, it has a potential to have great effect. So,
and we've also listened to some of the community members saying that it's just constant. There's constant need to have safety features downtown, and it just makes sense.
I do them for businesses, but just this last week I did one for a block watch as well. So the block watch it's in a development, and so Constable Feller, myself, and a volunteer were able to go there, do an assessment, make some recommendations, and I'll be providing those recommendations to them at their initial block watch meeting on the 29th.
Nice. Okay, sorry.
Okay, so then back to the downtown safety part. The CPO playing a role in that, we had 7 volunteers active over this reporting period, and they logged approximately 500 hours of patrols. So that would be speed watch, because when he's out in the community, he's also watching for things and reporting back to me. There's the bike patrol, which there's a couple of gentlemen that are doing that on a regular basis. As citizens on patrol, during the pandemic, it is smaller presence in the community than it was before, because they are primarily seniors, and so we're not putting them out and in vehicles together and things like that. And then the office volunteer programs. In addition to that, our Smart Step Youth Association that was active through the summer, because they're based out of the community policing office, just through osmosis they get some crime prevention interaction there. So we had some youth involved, ages 11 to 20, and they were involved in 6 different projects. They took part in garbage cleanup, graffiti removal, contributed to helping remove signs of street level stress that I can identify, that kind of thing. And they did some fundraisers and things like that.
What do you mean by street level stress?
So that's things that in my training I see that shows that may contribute to somebody feeling unsafe in an area or something like that. So that could be abandoned shopping carts around town with clothes in them, pile of clothes around, graffiti, maybe garbage, stuff like that. That's signs of stress in our downtown area.
Okay.
Over this time as well, the Endeavor to Be Better program, they're a great resource for me because when I see some signs of street level stress and I don't have a volunteer or I don't have the youth to do it, they're able to, they have a staff there of 4 and they're able to respond in a really timely fashion and clean up the larger sort of things. And yeah, as we're familiar, the shelter was reported at being a full capacity most nights, so that's sort of something that I do off my desk to help out the community. So that's kind of the shelter, if we can get people in there and securely housed, does help in downtown safety.
So how many beds do we have in the shelter? I thought we had 24.
17 beds, but there's 24 clients, so they're
Oh, okay.
beyond capacity. That's as of this morning when I spoke to them.
Thanks. Can I go back to a comment from our rally we had the other night about how police officers aren't seen? Police officers or safety, any of these are not seen, are not visible to the public. Are they plainclothes individuals? Do they have vests that show who they are?
Yeah, so for our foot patrols, it's a visible patrol, so they are in full uniform. Of course, we've had some pressures this summer, but 83 foot patrols is what we did, which I think is a good show.
And that's for police officers?
Yes, those are 83 police officers on patrol. Now, as far as the volunteers go, Marlene can fill you in on that.
So the volunteer bike patrol will be 2 volunteers together and they wear a high-vis vest and they stop and talk to citizens. And the citizens on patrol, that's in the evening. They are in their own vehicle and they have a metallic sign on the side of their car.
Okay.
Yeah. And yeah, so those are.
So there are
signs.
There are signs. Thank you.
Our next item was school safety. Again, bearing in mind that there's no school in the summer here. We did have, I guess we engaged with the local schools 22 times over that period. So between April and really the end of the school. So these activities ranged from, simply perhaps our officers conducting a speech watch in the school zone, a routine visit in the school, conducting a bike rodeo, or sometimes it's just perhaps me or the 2IC meeting with the school district. So we would count that as an engagement with the school. And of course, we hope to increase that now with the beginning of the school year. Dave?
One of the ways that we've also been involved with the local school board as well is in assistance to our local natural resource officers and conservation officers. I know that with the recent fire activity, there's been a lot of wildlife, especially bears, that have been driven into the city. There's a lot of food attractants out for them, garbage, and we actually routinely service a lot of calls for bears in and around the school areas, which can obviously take up quite a bit of our officers' time. I mean, we're not particularly equipped to necessarily deal with these animals, but we can assist our local conservation resources in making the school areas safe, especially before, after, and during school hours around like lunch when kids are primarily out. So there's been a lot of recent contact with our different schools, Collettville, Central. The other day I was for animal activity or activity.
The next item, Your Worship, is substance abuse. And I'll just briefly talk about it here, and I would like to come back maybe at the end of the meeting in camera for additional conversation about this. But I guess for this open session here, I'll say that for the first half of 2021, Merritt has experienced a higher percentage of illegal drug overdoses than the provincial average. And I'm getting this from the BC Centre for Disease Control, or even the reports that are published publicly from the coroner service of BC. you know, while obviously drug use and drug overdose, those are clearly social and public health issues, the distribution of illegal drugs is a police one. So to address this illegal distribution of drugs, we had set out a two-pronged approach. One of them, of course, being rooted in the enforcement with a goal to identify the source of incoming harmful drugs in our communities, and then work towards developing grounds needed to hold those responsible for courts. And I'll talk about that a little bit more in camera in terms of where we're at with that. The second approach was rooted in the implementation of an opioid strategy to tackle the number of overdoses in the community. Again, mostly a social issue here, an education issue around the use of an naloxone kit. And a lot of these services are already in place through some of our partners like Shawinigan Community Health. But we do recognize that our officers, you know, are on the road, on the streets, dealing with a lot of the vulnerable community. Provides us, we believe it provides us with the opportunity to augment the work already done by our partners to ultimately, help save lives. So I'll let Dave talk about where he's at with this program because he's been tackled with running that.
Yeah, so as through the CPO office, we have obviously a large presence in the downtown core. There's a opioid pilot project that's been put out by some of our other local RCP attachments, particularly the Vernon area, in providing some end user kind of education to individuals that we have frequent contact with. We have kind of the unique opportunity within our policing realm that we encounter a lot of our street level kind of disenfranchised or street level drug users quite often, and these aren't individuals that are necessarily involved in any sort of criminalized activity like the trafficking of such, but individuals that we may encounter that are experiencing medical crisis and other things like that. And what we hope to do is to facilitate and ensure that they have access through means of education and providing them opportunities to link up with our partner organizations to ensure that that they are using in the least riskful way possible. Unfortunately, I mean, it's not within the ability of the police to necessarily cure or assist these individuals out primarily of their, their medical dependency on these narcotics. But we can assist ensuring that the lives of our citizens here are. So one of the partners that we have here in town are Ask Wellness. We know that twice a week they have set up that they actually do drug testing here in town. We've provided that information, and we assist some of our local patrons in accessing our partnership there so that they can have their drugs tested if they so desire, and that ensures that that they're not using things that might be tainted with other things like benzos or fentanyl or other sort of dangerous narcotics. We also direct these clients to access services at the Ask Wellness, at some of our other First Nations and Indigenous community health organizations, and through the hospital itself in harm reduction. We obviously ensure that these individuals, if we find them through our proactive patrols, we ensure that they're not using alone, or they're using in circumstances where they would end up being at increased risk of an overdose. As Staff Sergeant Major has already commented, there's some different partners that we have with the shelter, with our Indigenous communities. We've got partnerships with Ask Wellness. There's a partnership through the hospital there. We have one of our local doctors that runs a methadone clinic there. So there's ample opportunities for these individuals to access assistance and resources in the community. The biggest stumbling block, a lot of them, is getting them to that stage where they are comfortable to access them. And through our relationship with these individuals, it allows us to ensure that they are accessing the most appropriate resources.
Thank you for that. Is there any attempt at suggesting rehab, and do we have any rehab resources in the area at all?
We don't have any local rehab resources, but there are definitely opportunities where working through our partners in consultation with our partners, that we can access those resources for our clients. One of the things that does come up with us is Marlene and I also sit on our merit MAST committee, which identifies certain people that have come through, either been recommended by us as the police or our social assistance partners in the community as being at a higher level of risk. And we specifically will work with those individuals to try and access them some sort of rehabilitation or some improvement. And it's not always that those individuals are necessarily open to it, it's just that they've been identified by our committee as being an individual who could use that increased presence. And so that facilitates kind of a greater emphasis on outreach to those individuals, either be it us or our partners, to ensure that they have adequate access to those opportunities.
Okay, thank you.
Anything you want to add there? If you want.
Okay, and so then the Community Policing Office works towards the substance abuse. I remain active on the Nickel Valley Shelter and Support Society board. That's something that was in place prior to me working into this position and remains active now. There's 3 programs there which we oversee, and they help out with health, addictions, and housing needs. The shelter falls under as one of those programs. There remains to be quite a few challenges, and there really does need to be sort of a strengthening of that society and an increasing maybe others that would be willing to help out. And we're hoping that through the Strengthening Communities grant that was currently awarded, that we'll be able to get some more support for that. And then I would be able to maybe take a little bit less of a role in that and do things like you were recommending. Or
Okay. Good, thank you.
So, Your Worship, other initiatives that we had identified for 2021 strategic plan were to enhance the relationship with Indigenous communities and leadership continuums for the attachment. I didn't include these on the reports here because these initiatives are tied to other communities or simply internal. So I just wanted to mention that if it looks like there's some things we're not reporting on, that's why.
Okay, thank you.
So that's basically the update in terms of a strategic plan. What I wanted to go into next was a review of my analysis of the policing situation here for the merit detachment as it relates to the municipal and the provincial jurisdictions. So I'll start here. In 2020, we merit, and when I say in this case merit, I mean the whole jurisdiction that we police, enjoyed nearly a 21% decrease in crime rate for the municipal jurisdiction and the provincial jurisdiction together over 5 years.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
What is your jurisdiction? I mean, I know it is mainly the city of Merritt, but you also go way beyond that.
Yeah,
on a
so
number of occasions.
we go up to Upper Nicola, and we come down everything between Upper Nicola and here, and continuing, I guess, towards Chilliwack, we pick up Coldwater, and down to what's that, near the toll booth, basically.
Yeah, we're down by Juliet Creek down there, so we cover Aspen Grove, we cover the Coldwater IR, and some of the little communities down in that area there. So Brookmere, the Cane Valley.
Now going towards Spence's Bridge, we are as far as just past Shacken, so all the bands in between, it's all ours. And just, I guess, most recently, we've now also began looking after Logan Lake
And
temporarily.
yeah, and normally you're somewhere between here and Logan Lake, right? Somewhere in that Mount Lake.
Correct, yeah.
And as far as Helmer?
Towards Kamloops, yes, correct.
Okay.
But now with Logan Lake, that takes us to Surrey Lake? Inks Lake, sorry. Yeah.
Oh, Inks, all the way to Inks.
Yeah, we can pretty much see Costco from.
And what about the other side, close to Ashcroft?
Oh, yeah, I don't know the exact, on that one, I think it's somewhere between Ashcroft and
It's about a third of the way.
Okay, so past the Highland Valley
Coppermine, yes.
copper mine that is actually part of Little Lake.
Yep.
Okay, so it's a huge district.
It's a massive area.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Where are we here? Okay, so here it is. So for I've looked at the provincial average for municipalities between 5 and 15,000 people, looking at the crime rate specifically, and looked at what we're looking at for merit. And in this case, I mean the municipal jurisdiction only. My analysis, of course, has demonstrated here that our crime rate for the municipal jurisdiction is well above the provincial average. And just to quantify that here, I put a little graph, but also above that, it gives you what our crime rate was in 2020, 2019, and working backwards. So 159 compared to 94 would be in 2020. And so on and so forth, working backwards. On the graph, you can see the brown, orange, depending on how colorblind you are. Line is the provincial average, and the blue is the merit municipal jurisdiction.
Is this when we had the 15 staff members, is it strength, whatever it's called, is that?
Yeah, so
the 15.
Yeah, so this, and I'll talk about that a little bit on the next page, Your Worship. So this is between 2016 and 2020. You're correct, that does not include the additional 2 members that we have picked up since. And so I talked about that here on the next page. It said, when analyzing the crime rate, it's also important to analyze the criminal case burden, because such an analysis provides a comparative overview between criminal cases investigated by the merit of CMP within the municipal jurisdiction compared to the provincial jurisdiction. This analysis revealed that merit officers are investigating a higher number of criminal cases than the provincial average for a population between 5 and 15,000. And that's displayed below on the graph. For example, in merit, the merit average for 2019 and 2020 was 110 and 82 cases per officers respectively, compared to 84 and 72 at the provincial average. Now, with the addition of the 2 municipal officers, I guess in 2021, we do anticipate that our officers will move closer to the provincial average, but this is based on current population. With the projected population increase, we're saying that early engagement of policing will be key to maintain public safety and services in the city. Excuse me. Next page, page 6. I also looked at the call for service burden analysis for the municipal jurisdiction. Again, this is to recognize that not every call to the police is necessarily tied to a criminal offense or a crime. We are often called upon to deal with quasi-criminal or simply issues that are really not in the realm of policing, but we happen to be the only service provider out there, certainly after hours, and people like to call us, I guess. This analysis of calls for service, again for the municipal jurisdiction, shown below, demonstrates that fluctuation over the past 5 years. Merit officers have taken a higher caseload than the provincial average for 3 of the 5 years, in 2016, 2017, and 2019. A low caseload in 2018, and an equal caseload. I don't know how that happened. They should have bought a lottery ticket. Equal caseload in 2020. So it'll be interesting to see what happens in 2021 and the years beyond with the addition of these 2 officers, municipal officers. Again, just to be fair, I wanted to provide a comparison to the picture in on the provincial side of the house. So that would include our response to all the Indigenous communities that we police. So the 5 bands, the TNRD, and everything in between, including the highway. Again, doing a comparison with provincial jurisdiction with a population between 5 and 15,000 people. In this case, we're seeing that we are slightly below the provincial average, but it's fluctuated over the years, and it's almost like on par, if you will. When I looked at the criminal case burden analysis for the provincial area, it demonstrated that the criminal case burden faced by officers within the provincial jurisdiction is below the provincial average for a population of 5 to 15,000 people. Now, an important note here is that we do have the Merit BC Highway Patrol that operates out of our detachment. That they don't report to me, it's a provincial unit. They do respond to fatal collisions on the highways when there is a confirmed criminality. So that would, of course, impact the number of criminal cases that we see provincially somewhat. How much, I don't really know. I think it would be fairly negligible, but it is worth noting. The interesting part with the provincial jurisdiction is when you look at the calls for service burden. In this case, that's the next page on page 9, Your Worship, it demonstrates that over the past 3 years, so 2018, 2019, and 2020, we are well above the provincial average. It's hard to say exactly why that is, but we have seen a change, a slow change over the past 3 years with the way the BC Highway Patrol responds to calls for service on the highway. Most recent change that was announced was that they would only respond to fatal collisions with a confirmed criminality. So further narrowing what they respond to. Their mandate is enforcement, and so when it comes to collisions on the highway now, I want to say that the large bulk of them falls on the local detachment here. So why is this important for our community partners? Would we project an increase in the Merit population related to future housing, commercial development, or large but temporary project that bring large outside workers, for example, the TMX work camp? We anticipate that the demand on policing services is going to continue to trend upward. As we've seen here, the police force, certainly when we're talking about the municipal jurisdiction, is already operating beyond or equal to, at least for one of the cases, the provincial average. And there is a demonstrated risk that with the population increase, the workforce may become overworked and well beyond the provincial average within the municipal and provincial jurisdictions. This could likely or possibly affect the ability of the detachment to maintain some specialized services, like some of our major crimes that is performed by our municipal GIS or even our downtown focused community policing officer. While we anticipate that the specialized services to the various Indigenous communities serviced by the Merit Indigenous Policing Unit under the Community Tripartite Agreement will not be affected, this situation would likely affect the delivery of core policing services to all our communities serviced by the Merit RCMP, including the Indigenous communities. And this kind of led me to an analysis of what we discussed a little bit at the last meeting, which was looking at the distribution of the workload in the municipal jurisdiction and the provincial jurisdiction. And looking at the municipal jurisdiction first in 2020, I guess we were able to identify that 67% of the work done in the municipal jurisdiction was done by municipally funded members, while the rest was done by non-municipally funded members. Looking at the same thing on the provincial side, what we see is that 56% of the work in the provincial jurisdiction is done by municipally funded officers, while the rest is done by non-municipally funded officers.
So are you saying that in the municipality, you take on 67% and the rest of, all the rest of resources take on 27?
Well,
But it's the opposite way when you look at doing provincial work. It's not an equal, what am I trying to say? It's not an equal workload share.
well, yeah, it's obviously not comparing apples and apples in the sense that we've got 17 municipally funded officers and I've got 5 provincially funded officers, right? So that will obviously impact how that looks on the chart. But it's just to say that, I guess that leads me to say this. With 5 provincially funded officers, out of the 5, I'll eliminate 1 for a minute because he's a senior manager in the office, not frontline police officer, or not a frontline responder, if you will. It leaves me 4 provincial officers to do core policing between the 5 bands, the highway, and everything in between. So the result of that is what you see here with our municipal officers often responding outside of the municipal jurisdiction. Part of that is also because of the way the workload is distributed. We're not a jurisdiction like Kamloops, for example, that has a city detachment and a rural detachment that are able to completely separate their response to the provincial jurisdiction to the provincial rural detachment and vice versa. We are all mixed into one, and so as by virtue, there's some days that I may not have any provincial members on the board to respond outside of the provincial jurisdiction. So when the dispatcher picks up the radio, it goes to whoever is available, and that could be a provincial member, it could be a municipal member as well, or both, depending on what's going on. So,
and one of the things, and I'm not sure if it was Wayne Rideout that actually said this, I'm pointing to him saying it, but I'm not exactly sure if it was him, but talking about the whole area is N&N, which is our TNRD area, the area you described, where there isn't an allocation of policing services that is done by the TNRD. So there's potential there to work some funding in and perhaps look at other resources. That's probably into the future. It won't happen tomorrow, but at least that's one area that we can look at because there isn't any funding coming. Certainly not to this detachment.
no, well, I'm not aware of any regional district in the province directly contributing towards policing. But of course, residents in those areas would pay taxes to the province, and but anyway, that's for somebody way smarter than me, I guess. I just had a concluding analysis and a bit of a recommendation here that I wanted to talk about. So, and if that's okay, I think I'm going to read that instead of just kind of muddling my way through it here, just so that I'm clear in what I'm saying. So, the analysis over a 5-year period, 2016 to 2020, demonstrates that the crime rate in the city of Merritt is above the provincial average for a municipal jurisdiction with a population between 5 and 15,000 people. The criminal case and calls for service burdens are also above the provincial average. Again, the caveat is these numbers did not include the 22-21 boost of 2 officers. While the workload distribution can fluctuate from year to year based on the detachment makeup, the way officers are assigned to calls for service, and other factors, a review of calls for service in the municipal jurisdiction for 2020 identified that municipal officers handled 67% of the calls for service in the municipal jurisdiction, and 33% were handled by non-municipal officers. With respect to the provincial jurisdiction, the analysis over the same 5-year period identified that the crime rate for the Merritt provincial jurisdiction is slightly below the provincial average for provincial jurisdiction with a population between 5 and 15,000 people. While the criminal burden has significantly increased over the past 3 years. I'm going to skip the line here. While the criminal provincial jurisdiction case burden is also below the provincial average, the calls for service burden has significantly increased over the past 3 years and are well above the provincial average. While the increase cannot be attributed to one single factor, a shift in the mandate for the BC Highway Patrol combined with a continued high volume of vehicular traffic through the jurisdictions are likely contributing factors. A review of calls for service in the provincial jurisdictions for 2020 identified that municipal officers handled 56% of the calls for service in the provincial jurisdiction, and 44% were handled by non-municipal officers. So my recommendation is this: in order to maintain public safety and a healthy police force, early engagement and collaboration from our community partners is required to ensure that a number of municipally and provincially funded positions for core policing services are maintained and are in pace with projected community growth. In the absence of early engagement, the risk is that the police force, which is already working beyond the provincial average already, will become overworked. While difficult to predict, it stands to reason that an overworked police force will have a negative impact on core policing and some of our specialized services, which could affect public safety.
Any comments on the report? Thank you. This is a good, thorough report. I think the numbers hopefully should be different for 2021. Do you have a partial report for 2021? And I'm thinking because we've added the 2 extra, but we haven't had the second one
We have
until
both.
very recently.
Yeah, both these positions have been filling your worship, and no, I don't have a partial because I can tell you what the crime, some crime statistics look like, in terms of, we seeing increases in certain categories and decreases, but to give you partial pictures in terms of where we are compared to the provincial average, I can tell you that's not going to come out till the end of 2021 or probably even into 2022.
In our rally that we had outside the other day, we had a number of citizens with concerns of what they saw as increased property crime.
Yeah, so 2021, this is between January and August, so up to August. So that would be up to August 31st, Your Worship. We are on track, and I say on track because these numbers change all the time. But we're on track for a 10% decrease on commercial break and enters. Again, I anticipate that that's going to change. Like at the end of the year, we could easily see an increase in that or a decrease. It's hard to say, right? But this is what we're looking at currently. Break and enters to residences, right now we're on track for a 26% decrease. Let's look at theft under 5,000. We're looking at a 13% decrease, but theft over $5,000 for some reason is looking at a 500% increase.
500%.
Yeah, but again, we're talking small numbers, right? So,
Yeah.
you know, if you look at it in 2020, between January and August, there was one theft of over 5,000, and we've got 6 now. So that would give you a 500% increase. So that's why when I talk about these stats, sometimes I stay away from the percentage, because you hear 500 and it's like, sounds like a big deal. And when you dive into it and you look at the numbers, it may not be as alarming as the percentage would suggest.
So that scale there, that could include something as simple as like a generator or a quad or something, right? So.
Yeah.
Yeah, so those are, let me see, shoplifting, we're up. Right now we're on track for a 115% increase. Again, not a huge surprise to me, just because if I consider what happened in 2020 with the closure of a lot of businesses, and you know, in the beginning of the pandemic, there was a lot of, I think the population was in by and large maybe better at staying home, and I don't know if better is the word, but there was just an increase of people staying home than what we see now.
Is there anything we can do as a city to address some of the fears that the residents have?
The answer is yes, but I have to think of my answer here.
Yeah, I mean, one of the best ways for people to engage and address those fears is to step up and volunteer for some of the programs that we have in our municipality, right? We do have very strong block watch programs. We do have business watch programs. We have a lot of these sorts of organizations already in place for our community throughout the CPO, and we're at a real lack of volunteers for those programs right now. And we would love to see the public come out and participate in more of those, and participate in a meaningful way. One of the unfortunate things that we see a lot, especially myself being in my position, is I review a lot of the public media that is contained within the municipality, and we see some people comment or talk about vigilante activity and stuff like that as something, of course, we don't want to see as the police, right? It's not useful. It hampers prosecution and it hampers the court process. But there's a lot of ways that those individuals that are passionate, fired up, can volunteer with us, and they can have a very positive effect on our communities. The same with shoplifting activities. If you're a business owner and you want to have a partnership in that, we have a business watch program that's been widely publicized through our local media, which Marlene oversees there at the CPO. We regularly send out emails and other advice regarding local area frauds, scams, and other activity that we're seeing. If we see, you know, somebody, an uptick in people stealing tires, then there's going to be a release to that effect to those businesses, right? And as a business owner, they can assist us, and it is the cost borne to them, but in reviewing and updating things like their CCTV systems, because it doesn't do me a lot of good when I'm trying to investigate a theft from a business and I'm reviewing VCR tape still, and it's 2021. It does help to ensure that these business owners know how to use the systems, that they're operational, they work, lighting and things like that in the store contribute to a decrease in shoplifting behavior and other things like that. So there's
the whole
the septic, yeah, it's one big circle, and so. Absolutely, there are absolutely a lot of meaningful ways that our citizens can involve themselves in the process, and they're welcome to reach out to us.
Well, Your Worship, in terms of the city, to answer your question specifically, I think something concrete that the city could perhaps take the lead on would be in the conversation with our other community partners in the province. I think, as you can see, a lot of the a lot of our officers are called upon to respond to calls for service outside of the municipal jurisdiction. And while I don't think we can eliminate that, there's perhaps opportunities to hopefully help, balance things out a little bit so that our officers can spend more time in the city. As the commander in merit, I can tell you that my desire is for my municipal officers to be in the city as much as they can. It's a message that I convey regularly. It's an expectation that I've outlined, but I can't stop the calls from coming in from the outlining jurisdiction, and I can't withhold the service because of somebody else that's paying the bill. So I think if the city, I'm certainly having conversations or initiating conversations with my other community partners. I've reached out to, this week I've reached out to Upper Nicola, I've reached out to Lower Nicola, we're working on setting up meetings there as well, just to have similar conversations around resourcing levels and just to bring awareness to the structure of the RCMP in the jurisdiction for our political establishments and I think our citizens important. Because we all wear the same uniforms and they all see the same cars, so I think there's a natural conclusion by people that we're all the same. But we're not. For example, I have a 4-member unit that is called the Merit Indigenous Policing Unit. These 4 members are funded primarily by the federal government in partnership with the province, with a very specific mandate to be, akin to like what we see with our community policing office, like crime prevention driven. And even with some of our community partners, I'm having to make sure that that's understood too, right? There's sometimes a view that these officers are the ones that are going to respond to the 911 call when it's made, but that's not the case. So I think something concrete would be for perhaps the city to help steer some of these relationships, conversations. You just outside of what I can do as the detachment commander, right? What can be done politically together to improve our combined situation.
And as a city, we have talked to Mr. Farnworth in terms of what the situation is here. I sit on the LGCMC committee, UBCM committee, so Wayne Rideout also sits on that committee, which means I've got a little bit of access through that committee. But there's also conversations with TNRD, another board that I'm sitting on, that we can actually look at least having some of these initial conversations. I know nothing's going to happen overnight, but the conversations have to be had for some point in the future. So I'm more than committed to, and so is our council committed to having these conversations so that we can better ease the minds of the citizens, but also ease the burden on some of the police officers. So we are looking at a number of those things. The other thing is, I think if we can utilize our marketing in order to be able to request or looking for volunteers for the block watch programs or the business watch programs. And I think we'd be more than willing to take that on. I'll let our CIO speak to that. But
yes. Yeah, I'm very confident that we can make that happen. I thought that what we heard at the rally was generally very respectful. I love that safety, public safety, is at the forefront right now, and I think that that's something we're all very passionate about in this room. And so if there are ways that we can advance that, whether it be through marketing or sub-TED reports or whatever it is that we can do, we're absolutely open to looking at how we can expand and improve those services. So great feedback, Your Worship.
Good. Is there any other comments on that? Doesn't look like any. We're ready to move on then to the Auditor General, local government performance in managing policing arrangements and budget oversight. And that was the report that I asked just to be put on the agenda, because this was the report that actually started this committee to begin with. And if we look at the actual rationale, it's really an oversight of policing services without the involvement of doing the day-to-day. And I just wanted to make sure that we were all aware of what the role of this committee is. I'll just have to have everyone look through it at their own time, and especially in terms of council, we need to understand what our role is and what it isn't. That was all I put that on the agenda for. We also have, did anyone want to speak to that? Okay. 5.3, quarterly budget update. And leave that for RCAO. Sean?
Your Worship, you'll note that this is a report that looks very similar to what you had seen on Tuesday, and so really it's on here in case there were any questions or items that council didn't have the opportunity to dive into the level of depth that you wanted to do at the regular council meeting. We thought that maybe the council meeting discussion then might have been a little bit less robust, and we may have needed it here because they came out at about the same time, but I think that a lot of the discussion there was quite robust, and so you may not have questions. So I'll defer to you as to whether you would like to take any of these up in greater measure.
Well, and when we look at this, this is all protective services. This is not just RCMP. This is also fire, bylaw, and building inspection and all CPO expenditures. So it's certainly not just RCMP services, but a total of, as of 2020, about 25% of our budget overall. So it is a huge part of our budget. This just pretty well confirms exactly what Staff Sergeant Druin was telling us, that we have a lot of numbers that are above the provincial average, and hopefully we can address those over time. Are there any other comments before we move into in-camera? Councilor Richard.
I think that through all the comments in the presentation that we had today, everything was already addressed. Concerns from the community were brought forward. People are wanting to know what they can do. We discussed that. We're asking what programs we can do to get support for funding, because your reach is so wide with the police, having to go so far on the highway when there's events that happen, accidents, and hopefully we can make some improvements there. So I think public is just happy to get information and have information that they can hear about and get stats from us, and thank you for that.
There was also something, Constable Filler, that you mentioned, I think it was you that mentioned it the other day about, at our last meeting, about bylaw. You work together with our bylaw officer, and is there some areas that can be transferred, and I'm not saying directly to this one individual, but to bylaw services in general, and can we look at the need for police officers versus bylaw officers, and are there some things that we can do that you don't have to do as officers?
Yes, definitely. I've had a great opportunity so far to work with the Merritt City Bylaw Officer. He's very enthusiastic in his position, and it's great to see. He's already been of great assistance. One of the things before that we were kind of overburdened with that was not a responsibility of ours, but we were left with really no other opportunity was specifically a lot last year. We actually had incidences of where we'd have aggressive dogs that were loose that were taken by our officers and actually placed in a detachment cell because there was no city bylaw officer after hours that was available to come and say take a dog to the pound, and we didn't have access to the said pound either or the equipment to necessarily facilitate that. So that there is a prime example of how a city bylaw officer can assist us and obviously cut costs to our services as well. Is that now we don't have a dog sitting in a jail cell or a vehicle compound.
I know it sounds weird.
It sounds but what do you do, right? If you've got a 120-pound dog running around downtown at 2 a.m. in the morning growling at people, you've got to do something with it.
Can I ask staff to look into the potential for, I don't even know what I'm looking, with the wording I'm looking for, but
Yeah, I mean, I think that at 2 a.m. calling the bylaw officer is one option, but the other thing I can do is cut you a key. I think that that might be the real way that we go about this, and we'll have a discussion on that front, Your Worship.
But it is something that comes up, right, where it's not primarily a responsibility of our police services, but it is something that we assist with, right, with these nuisance animal complaints. Another way that the city's really stepped up and helped this year is through some of the septic assessments and things that were identified through the foot patrols is wherever you have properties that become unsightly or other activity like that, you're just going to have an influx of other material that builds up, be it garbage or whatnot else. And that, of course, definitely contributes, as Marlene said before, to that those social stressors. It gives you the feeling of being unsafe. I mean, if you walk through an old ghostly warehouse district and there's broken windows, you assume that it's unsafe. And so there are properties that have been identified that we've worked through with bylaw services that haven't been necessarily meeting their part to be a part of a beautiful downtown core. And we're working with the city to try and identify those and clean those up. And it's through our cooperation with our bylaw services and the city works as well that we can get those done. But that's something that we hadn't seen necessarily in previous years that we're now seeing. So
perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you. Well, I'm going to close this session, and I guess we need a motion that the meeting be closed to the public as the subject matter being considered is pursuant to Community Charter Section 91D, the security of the property of the municipality. Second.